Question number 2, in the name of the Right Honourable Christopher Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by all of his government's statements and actions?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yes, and especially our actions to get on top of inflation. This morning, Stats New Zealand confirmed that inflation fell to 2.2% in the September quarter, the lowest rate in more than 3.5 years. And it is clear that our plan, our economic plan, is working, which is why under our government we're getting on top of inflation fast. Just before the election last year, Treasury picked that inflation would have only fallen to 3.1% by this time and wouldn't have reached 2.2% until the end of next year. And that's despite all the scaremongering from the opposition that fully funded tax relief, which Labor didn't support, for supporting working families with the cost of living, would actually push inflation higher. Didn't do that. But instead, our economic plan is delivering lower inflation, lower interest rates, 2 interest rate cuts in 10 months versus, I think, 6 or 7 increases over the last 6 years. And importantly, what we're seeing is the foundations for economic growth to get New Zealand back on track are in place.
Supplementary question. Why did his government cut funding for apprenticeships in critical infrastructure sectors when apprentice numbers are already in decline, compounding the skills shortages in the trades sector?
Well, what I'd say to the member is the apprenticeship boost was actually another case of Labor leaving behind another fiscal cliff. We've made funding for apprenticeship boost permanent, so the program wouldn't expire like it would under Labor, and at the same time we're targeting it at the skills that we need.
Supplementary question. Why has he and his government cut funding for apprenticeships in areas such as pipeline construction, bitumen resurfacing, road construction and maintenance, and drinking and wastewater treatment, when this country is facing major challenges in those areas, and this will only exacerbate skill shortages?
Well, we have to make sure we are spending money carefully, and that's what we do on this side of the House. We don't waste money. We make sure that that's only a very small proportion of those that are actually using Apprenticeship Boost. And what I'd say to you is that we are making sure that we've got support for the skills we need, like building and agriculture and manufacturing, forestry, food and hospitality.
Supplementary question. Why was providing over $200 million in tax breaks to the tobacco company Philip Morris more important to his government than keeping people in apprenticeships?
I think, just a minute, there's a word in there that probably shouldn't have been in there. You want to ask that question again?
What's that?
I think you referred to the entity belonging to someone, which you didn't. So I think it's, just ask the question again.
Why was providing over $200 million in tax breaks to companies like Philip Morris, the country's largest supplier of cigarettes, more important to his government than keeping people in apprenticeships?
Well, I reject the characterisation of that question. What I would say to that member is that on this side of the House, we are very committed to lowering daily smoking rates. We are determined to deliver on smoke-free 2025, and we're going to make alternatives available. And also what I'd say is, with respect to the so-called tax that he talks about, all we've done is make sure Treasury is conservatively estimating the loss of excise tax by any shift that happens to an alternative product other than cigarettes.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary, right on Winston Peters.
Prime Minister, how often have you met someone whose logic is that when the tax on cigarettes go up, as it did December last year, it somehow is a concession to some business?
Yeah. It's just prudent to actually set money aside, and for the most extreme scenario, if we get a shift from cigarettes to alternative products, and that's all we're accounting for.
Supplementary question. Why should the construction sector have trust in his government when they are cutting apprenticeships, and in their first 10 months in power they have spent their time gutting school building programs, shelving state housing projects, cancelling major infrastructure projects, and leaving the industry staring down a pipeline that's looking more like an empty barrel?
Again, what you see a business confidence at a 10-year high. Why is that? Because they know this is a government dealing and improving the economic fundamentals. We are making sure there's financial discipline and no wasteful spending. We're making sure that inflation now, for the first time in 3.5 years, is within the band. Interest rates cuts are coming down. Confidence is up. That leads to economic growth and people in work.
Supplementary question. If things are so good for the building and construction sector, why are there 10,000 fewer people employed in the building and construction sector now than there were the day he became Prime Minister?
Very good. Because this economy is dealing with the lag effects of woeful economic mismanagement by that member and his former government. What is good news is that consents are up 2%. The Infrastructure Commission's latest pipeline estimates total over 6,000 projects, $147 billion worth, and the Transport GPS put in $33 billion for the next 3 years. And if the member cares a lot about it, I look forward to his support of our fast-track legislation, because that was a great idea from David Parker. We've built on it. There's 149 fantastic projects, 55,000 potential new homes, 30% increase in electricity generation, and 180 kilometres of new roads, rail and public transport.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Why won't he admit that his government doesn't care about the damage it causes to New Zealand's infrastructure, workforce and economy, as long as his favourite pet projects like tax breaks for landlords and tobacco companies get billions of dollars that could so desperately be spent elsewhere?
Oh, it's a terribly sad day for the Leader of the Opposition. We have good news, which we have inflation in the band. We've delivered income tax relief for low and middle income working New Zealanders, people the Labour Party used to care about but don't anymore. We've got fast-track legislation sitting there and he refuses to support it. Come on board, do something positive.